Good evening, my friends. Where are you listening from tonight? And what's in your cup? Perhaps tea, perhaps something stronger. Tonight's case takes us to a quiet English village, Brentley, where Easter morning came and went, yet the church bell never rang. No one thought much of it, until a man was found dead beneath the silent tower. So settle in, my friends, because sometimes silence itself is the loudest confession. St. Mary Mead, morning still. Miss Marple trims the small herb pots on her windowsill. Soft snip, snip. She likes precision. It calms the mind. The clock chimes once, 9:30. Tea cools beside her notebook. Nothing urgent, no visitors expected. Then, footsteps. The postman. He nods, leaves one envelope. Thick paper, red wax seal. Unusual. She sets her scissors down, wipes her hands, studies the crest on the wax. Clithering. Sir Henry Clithering. Scotland Yard. Long retired. Never idle. Marple breaks the seal, reads slowly. Her eyes narrow. A curate Jonas Merewood found dead beneath the bell tower at Brentley Parish. Body cold before dawn. Bell untouched. Rope unbroken. Yet the bell never rang for Easter morning. Sir Henry's note is brief. Police call it heart failure. I call it doubt. Would you come? She folds the paper. Sips cold tea. No emotion, only quiet analysis. Heart failure rarely leaves wax burns on rope. She writes in her diary. Brentley Parish. 9:10 train. Easter bell. Gladys, hearing the chair move, looks in from the hall. Shall I pack your coat, ma'am? Marple nods. The warm one. There's frost up north. She glances again at the letter. A clergyman dead. A bell that stayed silent. Silence where sound should be. That alone is reason enough. She ties her scarf. Places the folded letter beside her knitting. The morning feels slightly colder. She looks to the small mantel clock. Tick, tick. Even time sounds uneasy. Marple murmurs to herself. A bell is meant to call the living, not witness the dead. The words hang in the room, like the pause before a truth reveals itself. And with that single thought, she reaches for her traveling bag. The investigation has already begun. Miss Marple sat very still. The letter lay open on her table. She read the name again. Reverend Jonas Merewood. She repeated it softly, testing how it felt in her mouth. Names told stories if you listened. Her eyes moved down the page. Sir Henry's handwriting, neat but impatient. He never wrote for pleasantries. He wrote when something troubled him. She reached for her small brown diary, turned to the fresh page, wrote in slow, careful lines. Easter bell, Brentley Parish, train 9:10 a.m., then underlined once. The sound of ink scratching paper steadied her thoughts. Gladys entered from the kitchen, drying her hands on her apron. Shall I pack your green scarf, ma'am? Yes. And the gloves with the leather trim, Marple said. She closed the diary. Frosty weather calls for readiness. Gladys hesitated. Something wrong in Brentley? Marple smiled faintly. Something quiet in Brentley. Too quiet. The maid frowned but said nothing. She went to fetch the case. Marple folded the letter again, sliding it beside her spectacles. She always travelled light mind, heavier than luggage. She tidied the table. 1 teacup, 1 teaspoon, 1 note that changed the day. When Gladys returned, she found her mistress still seated, eyes lowered, lips moving. Marple whispered almost to herself. When a bell refuses to ring, something human stops it. She rose slowly. Checked her watch. Enough time for order. Travel bag by the door. Scarf folded neat. Gladys followed her gaze toward the window. The street was ordinary. Children passed on bicycles. Nothing suggested death. Yet the old woman's face carried that familiar stillness, the one that came before deduction, began. Marple turned toward the mantel clock. Tick, tick. Each second sounded deliberate, like a clue insisting to be heard. She slipped the diary into her handbag, looked once more at the letter. Her finger traced the final line from Sir Henry. Police see chance. I see cause. she murmured. "As do I." Outside, a sparrow landed on the step, hopped twice, and flew away. Marple didn't notice. Her mind was already at the station, watching the 910 train whistle through the morning fog toward a village that kept too many secrets. The bell had not rung. The priest had died, and somewhere between sound and silence someone had made a choice. She lifted her case, straightened her hat, and said softly, "Time to find what stopped the call." The clock answered with one low chime. Then silence. Long, patient silence. The kind that hides intention. And that was enough for her to know the truth had already begun to move. Steam rose faintly from the station platform. Miss Marple stood near the carriage door, ticket folded neatly in her glove. The 9:10 train waited, engine humming like a question not yet asked. She climbed aboard, chose the corner seat. Always the one with the widest view. A man in uniform passed, nodding politely. Inspector Harper. Young, polite, trying to look certain, failing slightly. He smiled, awkward, but kind. "Sir Henry said you'd be coming, ma'am." Marple nodded once. "He worries too much." "Maybe," Harper said. "Or maybe he worries just enough." He placed his briefcase on the rack. Terrible business in Brentley. A curate dead under his own bell tower. "Heart failure?" she asked. "So they say." He hesitated. "The rope snapped, ma'am." Marple turned her head. Her tone stayed level. "Ropes don't snap, Inspector. Motives do." He blinked. She poured a little tea from her flask. Offered him a cup. He accepted, still thinking about her words. They drank. In silence. Outside, the fog thickened. White fields blurred into shadows. Marple watched the outline of bare trees sliding by. Each one passed like a thought leaving trace behind. Harper cleared his throat. "They say the bell hasn't rung properly in years. Stuck mechanism. Old wood. People often call guilt mechanical," she said softly. "It isn't." He studied her face, unsure if she was joking. She wasn't. Marple took out her diary, flipped to the last note. Her handwriting was small, deliberate. Easterbell, Brentley Parish. Underneath, she added a line. Rope snapped. Truth, tied elsewhere. Harper leaned back. He spoke as if to himself. "You think someone wanted silence?" She replied, "Someone needed it." The train rocked slightly. A whistle echoed along the track. Distant. Lonely. Marple's gaze moved to the fog outside the window. "Tell me," she said, "what time does the bell usually ring on Easter morning?" 6 sharp, Harper answered. "And what time was the body found?" 6:30. She nodded slowly. Half an hour of silence. That's long enough to move a body. Or a lie. Harper looked uneasy. Marple took another sip of tea. "Don't look so troubled, Inspector. Death rarely arrives alone. It brings company secrets mostly." The whistle blew again. Louder this time. Steam curled past the glass. The outline of the church spire began to appear through the fog. Harper spoke quietly. "Nearly there." Marple closed her diary. Yes, and perhaps already too late. The train slowed. Metal groaned. Wheels hissed. The sound faded, then stopped. Outside, the village waited in stillness. No movement, no bell, only the echo of what should have rung. The whistle's last note vanished into the quiet, and the silence that followed felt deliberate. The carriage stopped outside the vicarage gate. Gravel crunched. Inspector Harper stepped out first. He waited, polite, while Miss Marple gathered her bag. A small house stood before them. Quiet. Windows shuttered. Curtains drawn. Marple adjusted her hat. "Too still," she murmured. Harper nodded, unsure what she meant. He led her up the path. No sound came from inside, only the faint creak of the porch as he knocked. After a moment, the door opened. A woman stood there, mid-50s, face pale, eyes dry but red at the edges. Mrs. Merewood. "Inspector," she said softly, her voice calm, practiced. "You must be Miss Marple. Sir Henry told me you might come." Marple inclined her head. "Thank you for seeing me." Mrs. Merewood stepped aside. "Please, come in." I've made tea. The hallway smelled faintly of polish. Everything tidy. Too tidy. Not a single thing out of place. Grief rarely keeps order. Marple's eyes moved quickly. Coat hooks. Umbrella stand. 2 sets of shoes. One larger, one smaller. She noted them silently. In the sitting room, the table waited. A bell rope lay coiled in the center. Thick. Rough. Cut clean across. Beside it, a photograph in a silver frame, Reverend Jonas Merewood. A kind face. Thoughtful eyes. She paused a moment. Mrs. Merewood followed her gaze. That was taken last spring. He loved that garden behind him. Marple said nothing. Her attention fixed on the table again. Half the surface gleamed. The other half held dust, thick and undisturbed. She leaned slightly forward. "Forgive me, Mrs. Merewood. May I ask who placed the rope here?" "The inspector brought it. From the tower." "And has anyone moved it since?" "No. I've left it just as he set it down." Marple's eyes drifted toward the window. Light caught the frame of the photograph. Half clean, half dull. She thought of hands cleaning what guilt touches, and what it dares not. "Your husband rang the Easter bell himself?" she asked quietly. "Yes, every year." "Even this one?" "The—" Woman's breath faltered. "He tried, but the rope, it broke." Marple's voice stayed level. "Before or after he died?" Mrs. Merewood looked away. "I don't know." Harper cleared his throat. "We'll check the tower again tomorrow." Marple nodded once, then turned back to the photograph. "The Reverend looks kind," she said. Mrs. Merewood managed a faint smile. "He was. Too kind, perhaps." Marple traced her gloved finger along the dusty edge of the table, stopped halfway. The line of her finger ended exactly where the dust began. "Sometimes," she said softly, "we clean what we can bear to remember." The woman didn't answer. Her eyes dropped to the floor. Marple straightened her gloves, looked once more at the coiled rope, then at the polished edge of the silver frame. "Half clean," she whispered. "Half hidden, half truth." And the silence that followed agreed with her. The next morning began without sound. No bell, no chatter. Only footsteps on stone as Miss Marple followed Inspector Harper through the churchyard gate. 2 people waited inside the vestry. A woman in a plain apron, hands wringing. The housekeeper, Mrs. Tull. Beside her, the sexton, old Mr. Briggs, cap in hand. Marple greeted them with a small nod. "Thank you for coming. You both knew the Reverend well?" Mrs. Tull answered first. "All my life, ma'am. He was good, quiet, never troubled anyone." Marple looked at the sexton. He nodded slowly. "Rang that bell near 40 years he did, though not lately." "Why not?" Marple asked. "Bell's no good," Briggs said. "Rope frayed. Mechanism stiff. Haven't heard a proper chime in years." Marple studied him. "Then why?" she asked softly. "Does the rope I saw yesterday look newly cut?" The man blinked. "Cut. Yes. Not torn, not frayed. Cut. Cleanly." Mrs. Tull frowned. "Then maybe the inspector trimmed it. Or the police. When they brought it down." Harper shook his head. "No one touched it. We found it as it was." Marple reached into her bag, pulled out her small magnifier. A quiet habit. She motioned toward the loose fibers Harper had collected. Under the glass they gleamed pale and sharp. "Fresh," she murmured. "No dust in the thread ends. No weathering." The sexton's face tightened. Could have been the children playing. Marple looked up. "Children don't climb towers at dawn." He lowered his gaze. She closed the glass, turned to her diary. Her pencil moved in neat strokes. Rope cut after death, not before. Harper watched her write. "You think someone staged it?" "I think someone prepared a silence," she replied. "People often assume noise hides truth, but silence draws attention faster." Mrs. Tull clasped her hands. "Why would anyone cut it after? Makes no sense." Marple smiled faintly. "Perhaps to make it appear that time itself failed, not a person." She snapped her diary shut. "Tell me, Mrs. Tull, did anyone else have keys to the tower?" Only the Reverend, she said. And me for cleaning, Briggs added. Marple raised a brow. You cleaned the tower recently? No, ma'am. Not for months. Too steep for me now. Then how is there candle wax near the pulley? Neither spoke. Their silence stretched long enough to be an answer. Marple folded her gloves. Thank you. That will be all for now. They left quickly, grateful to escape her eyes. When the door closed, Harper exhaled. You unsettle them, ma'am. She smiled lightly. Truth unsettles before it frees. She opened her diary again, reading her own line aloud. Cut after death, not before. Then added a second beneath it. Someone wanted silence noticed, not caused. She looked toward the tower window. The light there was narrow, pale, deliberate, exactly like intent. Afternoon light dimmed, behind the vicarage windows. Miss Marple sat in the small sitting room once more, tea untouched, notebook open. Mrs. Merewood sat across from her, hands folded tight, knuckles pale. The air carried the kind of silence that hides too much. Harper had gone to check records at the rectory. Marple waited. Patience often speaks louder than questions. At last, the widow sighed. There were debts, Miss Marple. My husband. He was generous. Too generous. Lent to villagers. Paid for repairs himself. It mounted. Marple nodded gently. Debt often begins in kindness. Ends elsewhere. Mrs. Merewood looked down. There was also a visitor. A man. Came before dawn 2 nights before Easter. I don't know his name. I didn't see his face. She hesitated. But Jonas met him in his study. They spoke for nearly an hour. After that, he was restless. Couldn't sleep. Kept locking the study door. Marple's voice stayed even. He kept the key himself? Yes. Still locked now? The widow nodded. I haven't had the courage to open it. Marple leaned forward slightly. Perhaps courage isn't required. Only truth. Mrs. Merewood's eyes filled but didn't break. I don't want to see what's inside. If he did something wrong. Her words stopped. She pressed her lips tight. Marple waited. The pause told more than confession. Then softly, Did he ever mention fear, Mrs. Merewood? The woman looked up, puzzled. Fear? Yes, of any kind. The widow thought. He wasn't a fearful man. But heights? Yes. He never liked the tower, said he'd rather pray on the ground than from the sky. Marple noted the reaction, the tremor in her tone, the shift of her hands. You're certain? Mrs. Merewood nodded, then frowned. Why do you ask? Marple closed her notebook. No reason yet, only patterns. The widow stared at the carpet. My husband changed that last week. Went up to test the bell himself. I told him not to. He said he had to. Something about proving faith through action. I thought it strange. Marple's eyes moved to the photograph on the mantel. Reverend Merewood smiling beside the church garden. Gentle eyes. Calm posture. A man of peace, not a climber of towers. She rose quietly. May I see the study? Mrs. Merewood hesitated, then shook her head. Not tonight. Please. Tomorrow. Marple accepted the delay. She understood hesitation when it masked guilt, not fear. At the door, she paused. Her tone soft, almost kind. Your husband feared heights, yet he was found beneath a tower. That is not faith, Mrs. Merewood. The widow's hand froze on the teacup. Her breath caught. Marple watched her reaction carefully. Fear of heights, she said again, turning toward the hall, yet found beneath a tower. The words hung between them, not as accusation, but as warning. The next morning, mist still hung over the churchyard. Miss Marple stood at the tower door with Inspector Harper beside her. The wood smelled of cold and dust. He turned the key, pushed it open. Hinges groaned. Inside, stone walls narrowed upward. A staircase spiraled into shadow. Harper lit a small lamp. Careful, ma'am. Steps are uneven. Marple nodded. Age makes everything uneven, Inspector, even truth. They began the climb. Each step echoed softly. The air grew colder, heavier. Marple counted them as they rose. She always counted. Numbers calmed the mind. Halfway up, she stopped. Rope fibers clung to the wall. She brushed one loose thread with her glove. Clean, new, no dust. Fresh cut, she murmured. Harper leaned closer. You're certain? Quite. Old rope phrase. This one bleeds. He frowned. Bleeds? In its own way. Truth always leaves residue. They reached the final turn. The bell hung above them, large, still, cold. Rope coiled neatly around the beam. The end. Sliced flat, not torn. Marple stepped closer. Finger traced the cut. Smooth edge. Steel blade, not time. She looked upward. The bell itself was spotless. No soot, no fingerprints. Untouched. Harper crouched beside her. No sign of struggle, he said. Marple's tone stayed quiet. Because the struggle wasn't here. She pointed to the base of the pulley. Someone stood here, used the knife, cut the rope, after he fell. The inspector examined the groove in the wood. Why bother cutting it? To change what people think they heard, she said. Or what they didn't. He straightened. The light from the lamp flickered. A faint smell drifted through the air. Candle wax. Faint but clear. Marple turned toward the beam. Near the pulley she spotted a small gleam. Something wedged in the groove. She reached for it with the tip of her glove. It came loose easily. A gold cufflink. She turned it over in her palm. Initials engraved into the metal. E.D. Harper peered at it. Not the Reverend's. No, she said. He wore plain silver. Humble man. E.D., Harper repeated. Could be Edwin Dare, the organist. He's been missing. Marple nodded slowly. Yes, and his initials now rest where a rope was cut. She opened her small diary, wrote with neat strokes. Bell untouched, rope sliced, wax sent, cufflink E.D., then closed it. Harper looked uneasy. You think the organist killed him? Marple shook her head. I think guilt climbed these stairs twice, once to sin, once to hide it. She placed the cufflink in a small paper envelope, slid it into her bag, then looked up at the silent bell. Its surface gleamed dull in the half-light, her voice barely above a whisper. One letter for each sin. The words fell into the air and stayed there, unanswered. By noon the fog had thinned. Miss Marple and Inspector Harper walked down the narrow lane toward the village square. Shops half open, curtains half drawn. People watched, then looked away. News of death always travels faster than decency. They stopped first at the grocer's. A thin man behind the counter recognized Harper. Terrible business, he muttered. Marple gave a small nod. Tell me, do you know an Edwin Dare? The man frowned. Organist. Lives above the cobblers. Or did. Haven't seen him since Easter night. Reliable sort? Harper asked. The grocer hesitated. Played well enough. Drank more than he prayed. Still, never cruel. Marple noted that tone. The way people defend the guilty only halfway. At the baker's, another story. Dare owed the Reverend money, said the woman at the till. Argued about it after choir practice. Loudly. You could hear through the window. Money for what? Marple asked. She shrugged. Something about repairs, church accounts, I don't meddle. She paused. Reverend looked shaken when he left. Mr. Dare just laughed. Outside, Harper kept pace beside her. Everyone mentions money, he said. Marple replied quietly. Money and faith often share the same drawer. He smiled faintly. Not sure that's comforting. It isn't meant to be. They crossed to the blacksmith's yard. A young apprentice leaned on the fence, curious. Reverend and Mr. Dare argued again the night before he died, he offered. How do you know? Harper asked. Heard them by the river path. The organist said something about collections not reaching heaven. Reverend told him to leave the parish. Marple's gaze stayed on the boy. Did you see which way they went? He shook his head. Just heard the words, then silence. She thanked him and walked on. When they reached the edge of the square, Harper stopped. That's 3 people with the same story. Marple adjusted her gloves, folding them slowly between her fingers. 3 people repeating what they've been told, not what they saw. That's different. He frowned. You don't believe them? I believe they believe it, she said. But belief isn't proof. It's habit. She looked toward the church tower in the distance. 2 men, money between them, faith between them. Both ring hollow when cracked. Harper opened his mouth to reply, but the words froze. A sound drifted across the air, faint, uncertain, a single organ chord. Marple turned her head slowly toward the church. The doors were closed, windows dark, no one inside. The sound came again, one low note, then silence. Harper whispered, "Who's playing?" Marple's eyes narrowed. Perhaps someone who never left. The note lingered in the air, trembling, fading, until only silence remained heavy, deliberate, like breath held before truth breaks. Evening settled slow over the vicarage. Miss Marple sat in the small hall, eyes on the closed study door. Mrs. Merewood had gone upstairs to rest. Inspector Harper waited by the window, hat in hand. Marple rose. "Time to look where truth hides, Inspector." He nodded. "I've tried that door. It's locked." "So was many a heart," she said softly. She took out her knitting case. One long pin, thin, precise. She bent slightly, working the lock. A soft click. The door yielded. The study smelled faintly of ink and candle soot. Papers stacked neatly. Desk polished. Order too careful to be natural. Marple stepped closer. Her gloved hand traced the surface, not a speck of dust. She opened the first drawer. Stationery. Sealed envelopes. Nothing strange. The second drawer stuck. She tugged once, then again. It gave way. Inside lay a brown ledger, worn edges, church account book. She opened it. Lines of figures, dates, signatures. Jonas Merewood and Edwin Dare, side by side. Withdrawals marked as maintenance, repairs, organ restoration. Harper leaned over her shoulder. "Both signed?" "Yes," which means both knew, which means both lied. She turned the pages. The final entry stopped her. A large sum, signed only by Dare. No note of repayment. She lifted her head. Money vanished the week before Easter. Harper frowned. "And the Reverend found out." She nodded. "Likely. And guilt doesn't sleep well." She checked the drawer again. Another envelope lay beneath the ledger. Plain paper, across the front in steady hand. "Confession do not open." Marple's expression did not change. She opened it. Empty. Not even dust. Harper looked surprised. "Nothing inside?" "Exactly," she said quietly. Someone wanted it found, but not read. She held the envelope up to the lamplight, edges crisp, no seal mark disturbed. "Made to look unopened," she murmured. "An imitation of honesty, a rare art." She placed it flat on the desk, then smiled faintly. He planned to write truth. Someone finished it for him. Harper stared at her. "You think the organist?" "Perhaps. Perhaps the wife. Or someone else who feared what a real confession would cost." She closed the ledger, placed both objects side by side. 2 lies pretending to balance. Harper glanced at the dark window. Wind stirred the curtains. "Feels colder in here now." Marple nodded once. "Rooms remember things, Inspector. Especially deceit." She wrote one clean line in her diary. Confession, blank truth written elsewhere. Then she blew out the lamp. In the darkness, the paper on the desk glowed faintly white, like a page still waiting for its final word. Evening shadows stretched across the vicarage study. Miss Marple waited until the house was still. Then she turned the brass knob. Locked. Expected. She reached for her knitting bag. Removed a single pin. Slim. Strong. A twist. A click. The latch gave way. Inside smelled of ink and stale candle wax. A tidy desk. Too tidy. Every drawer aligned. Every paper straight. Grief rarely cleans so well. She drew out the top drawer. Stationery, a penknife, stamps. Nothing more. The next resisted. She pulled once, twice, then it slid open. A brown ledger lay inside. Edges rubbed smooth. She opened it. Columns of numbers marched across the page. Dates, amounts. 2 signatures. Jonas Merewood, Edwin Dare. She turned the pages slowly. Withdrawals labelled repairs, organ work, collection fund, each signed by both. The last entry stopped her, a large sum. Dare's name alone, no note of repayment. Inspector Harper stood at the doorway. Church money? Yes, she said. And one of them spent it. The other discovered it. She laid the book flat. A smaller envelope peeked from beneath. Plain paper. Across the front, written firm and even, "Confession do not open." Harper moved closer. "You'll open it?" "Locks and warnings serve the same purpose," she said. "They invite curiosity." She broke the flap. Nothing inside. Blank. Untouched. He frowned. "Empty?" "Perfectly." She studied the edges. No tear, no crease, no trace of ink. "Someone wanted this to exist," she murmured, but not to speak. She replaced the envelope on the desk, aligning it with the ledger. 2 lies side by side. "Confession prepared," she said softly. "Truth prevented." Harper rubbed his chin. Perhaps he meant to fill it later. Or someone made sure he couldn't. Her gloved hand rested on the page where Dare's single signature bled slightly into the paper. She traced the line once. "Money and guilt," she whispered. "They always balance unevenly." Harper watched her close the ledger. "You think the organist silenced him?" Marple gave a small, almost kind smile. "Not certain yet, but silence was deliberate. Someone finished his honesty for him." She slipped the knitting pin back, into its case, turned toward the door. "Keep this room locked again, Inspector," she said. "It already knows too much." In her diary that night, she wrote 1 sentence. He planned to write truth. Someone finished it for him. Then she closed the book. The house settled. Downstairs a clock ticked twice and stopped. Rain began after midnight. Soft, steady, a sound that fills the gaps between thoughts. Miss Marple sat in the small guest room of the vicarage. Lamp dim, diary open. Her notes short, sharp, precise. Ledger signed twice. Confession blank. Cufflink ED. She set the pencil down. Listened. The house gave its usual size, old wood, tired hinges. Nothing unusual, until the faint crunch outside. She turned her head toward the window. Rain streaked the glass. Through it, a small glow moved across the garden. A lantern, swinging low. Someone walking toward the church. She rose quietly, slipped on her coat. No sound of footsteps on the stair. She moved like memory itself. At the door she paused, heard nothing but rain. Then the squeak of a gate. She stepped out. Cold air bit her cheeks. The lantern flickered ahead, just beyond the hedge. It bobbed with slow, deliberate rhythm, not searching, not wandering. Someone who knew the path. Marple kept her distance. Her shoes barely disturbed the gravel. Years of village life had taught her how to walk unheard. The path led toward the churchyard. The tower loomed ahead, its outline faint against the low clouds. The glow stopped near the vestry door. A key turned, metal against metal. The door opened. The lantern went inside. The light disappeared. Marple waited, counted silently to 10, then crossed the last few steps. The rain masked her movement. She pressed her hand against the wood, still warm from touch. From inside came a faint creak. Floorboards. Then the muffled sound of rope against stone. She knew that rhythm. The bell rope. Someone pulling it. But there was no ring, no echo, only the dull groan of the wheel turning above. Marple leaned closer to the keyhole. She saw movement, a figure, small and deliberate. Hands on the rope, body tense. Then a pause. The lantern light shifted, showing a woman's face, Mrs. Merewood. Her lips moved. A whisper, a prayer maybe, or something else entirely. Marple drew back, her expression calm, eyes thoughtful. She waited until the rope stilled. The woman turned off the lantern. Darkness swallowed the doorway. Marple took one step back, then another. The rain covered her retreat. She did not look away from the tower. She whispered to herself, almost without breath. The bell moved, but no sound followed. She walked slowly back toward the vicarage, each step deliberate, each thought measured. Someone had returned to the scene not to mourn, but to repeat. And silence, she knew, was rarely prayer. Morning came grey and still. Miss Marple asked for the tower key. Mrs. Merewood hesitated, then fetched it. No questions. Only a small tremor when she placed it in Marple's hand. Inspector Harper was away checking records. The church stood empty. Marple walked alone through the wet grass, each step quiet, deliberate. The tower door creaked open. Cold air met her face. She raised her small lantern. The scent of wax lingered, fresh, faint but present. She climbed the narrow stairs, slow, steady. Halfway up, she heard it again, movement. Soft, intentional. "Who's there?" Her voice calm, not loud. A pause, then a whisper. "It's me." Mrs. Merewood stepped from the shadows. Her eyes were wide, but not startled. She carried a small candle, flame trembling. "Forgive me," she said. "I come here each morning to pray." Marple studied her face. "Pray?" "Yes, for my husband's soul." Her voice shook, but her hands did not. Wax ran down her fingers. Her gloves glistened. Marple moved closer. The woman backed away slightly. "Why in the tower?" Marple asked. "Because this is where he left the world. I light a candle. I speak his name." Marple nodded slowly. "And last night?" "Mrs." Merewood blinked. "Last night?" "Yes," Marple said softly. "I saw a lantern. I saw the rope move." The widow's lips parted, then closed again. She said nothing, only tightened her grip on the candle. Marple stepped forward, lifted her own lantern higher. The light caught the edge of Mrs. Merewood's sleeve. Small threads clung there, fine, pale strands of rope. Marple looked at them, then met the woman's eyes. "Prayer leaves ashes," she said gently, "not threads." Mrs. Merewood froze. The flame in her candle wavered. Her hands began to shake. "I only wanted peace," she whispered. "Peace for him." Marple's tone stayed calm. "Peace cannot be built from lies." The widow's eyes filled. "You don't understand." "Then help me," Marple said. "Tell me what truly happened here." The woman's breath came uneven. "I can't." "You can." Marple's gaze did not waver. "You've already returned to the scene. That means you want forgiveness. Start there." Mrs. Merewood sank against the wall. Wax dripped onto the stone. She pressed the candle to her chest as if for warmth. "He was frightened," she said quietly. "He thought God had turned from him. He begged me to protect his name." Marple waited. The words came like slow rain. "He asked me to keep his secret. I promised I would, even after." Marple lowered her lantern. "After?" The woman's eyes filled again. Her lips trembled. "It was for his soul," she whispered, and the echo of her voice filled the tower, thin, fragile, like a confession already fading into stone. Inspector Harper returned before noon, boots damp, expression tense. He found Miss Marple in the vicarage drawing-room, her notebook open. Mrs. Merewood sat opposite, pale and silent. The candle on the mantel burned low. Harper removed his hat. "Mrs. Merewood," he began, "I need you to explain last night." Her eyes flickered toward Marple, then away. "I told her already," she said quietly. "I go to the tower to pray." Harper nodded once. "Every night?" She hesitated. "Not every night. Only when I can't sleep." "And the wax on your hands?" She looked down. "I light candles. It drips. That's all." Harper's tone stayed polite but firm. "Why not pray in the chapel, ma'am? Why there?" Her answer came slow. "It's where he died, where his spirit lingers." He opened his notebook. "You knew the bell rope had been cut." She shook her head. No. You saw nothing unusual? No. Marple's gaze never left her face. The pauses told their own story. Mrs. Meerwood wiped her eyes. Tears fell easily, but not deeply. Harper closed his book. Then perhaps you can tell us about Mr. Edwin Dare. The widow stiffened. I hardly knew him. Yet villagers heard you and your husband argue over him. Her voice rose slightly. They heard wrong. Mr. Dare was a troublemaker. He blackmailed my husband. Marple spoke softly. Blackmailed? Yes, Mrs. Meerwood said quickly. He discovered something in the accounts. Demanded money to keep silent. She looked from one to the other. My husband wasn't a thief. He tried to protect the church. Harper crossed his arms. Protect it by paying him off? She didn't answer. Her hands twisted the edge of a handkerchief. Marple's tone stayed even. And when Mr. Dare went missing after Easter service? I assumed he left town, the widow said. He was drunk, unreliable, always talking of leaving. Silence followed. Harper glanced toward Marple. Her pen scratched lightly over the paper. She wrote one short line. 3 lies wrapped in grief. The widow looked up suddenly. What did you write? Observation only, Marple replied. You lie to protect him. You grieve to protect yourself. Mrs. Meerwood stood abruptly. You think I killed him? You think I'm capable of that? Marple folded her notebook. I think people often do the unthinkable when love wears guilt's mask. The widow began to cry again, softer this time. Harper sighed, weary. We'll verify her story about Dare, he said. She's fragile, but something's missing. A knock at the door cut him off. Harper turned. A young constable stood in the doorway, cap dripping rain. Message from the station, sir. He handed over a folded note. Harper read it, expression hardening. He looked at Marple. They've found him, he said quietly. Found who? She asked. Edwin Dare, pulled from the river near the mill. Marple closed her notebook slowly. Then the story changes again, she said, because the dead never stay silent forever. The next day brought certainty. Inspector Harper returned from the coroner's office, coat soaked from rain. Miss Marple waited in the small parish room, hands folded neatly on her lap. He placed a report on the table. Autopsy's done, he said quietly. Edwin Dare drowned. Time of death Saturday night, before Easter morning. Marple's eyes lifted. Before the bell was due to ring. He nodded. The Reverend died after. Likely Sunday dawn. His fall was staged. She spoke without surprise. Of course it was. Harper rubbed his temple. His neck was broken, but not from a fall. Signs of pressure, as if someone arranged the body afterward. Marple said nothing for a long moment. Then softly, 2 deaths, 1 bell. He frowned. What do you mean? 2 men bound by the same act, she said. One killed for greed, the other for guilt. Harper leaned closer. You think the Reverend killed Dare? I think he confronted him, she replied. Perhaps demanded the money back. A quarrel near the river. A push. A panic. A death. Then came the silence. She stood, walked toward the window. By morning, the Reverend's faith broke under its own weight. He wrote a confession, then tore it up. He feared disgrace more than God. Harper opened the ledger, pages stiff from damp. These figures, withdrawals signed by both. Dare took money first. The Reverend followed to cover it. Both guilty. Marple turned. Both trapped. He looked uneasy. Then who staged the fall? She picked up the wax-stained glove from the evidence tray. Someone who wanted to cleanse sin with ceremony, she said. Someone who thought death could be redeemed if wrapped in ritual. Harper blinked. Mrs. Meerwood. Marple nodded once. She found Dare's body missing from the riverbank. Her husband gone before dawn. She pieced the story together, then rewrote it. She cut the rope, set the scene, turned guilt into grace. Harper's hand tightened around the paper. So she killed him? No, Marple said quietly. She preserved him. That's worse. He paced the small room. This makes her accessory, at least. Marple's tone stayed calm. She believed she was saving his soul, and perhaps in her way she was. She moved back to the table, opened her notebook. Her pen moved in careful strokes as she spoke. Bell rope cut, wax trail, forged confession, financial ledger, one hand fits all. Harper looked at her. Whose hand? Marple's answer came slow, steady. The one that prayed for forgiveness before sin. Harper stared at her. You mean she knew what he planned? Yes, Marple said softly. And she prayed for him before he climbed the tower. The rain outside began again, sharp against the glass. Marple closed her notebook. Prayers can't change truth, Inspector, but they can delay its sound. He looked toward the tower through the window. The bell hung motionless. Its silence, once pity, now sounded like judgment. Afternoon. Grey light over Brentley. Miss Marple and Inspector Harper stood in the Reverend's study. Mrs. Merewood sat nearby, pale and trembling. The large oak chest rested against the far wall, its brass lock still sealed. Marple gestured toward it. Shall we open it, Inspector? Harper nodded. Constable brought tools. He knelt, worked the keyhole. One turn. Two. A soft click. The lid lifted slowly. Dust rose. Inside, a folded cloth, a book of psalms, and a small wooden box. Marple's eyes fixed on the box. Open that. Harper did. The first thing inside was a ring. Gold. Simple design. Engraved inside with ED. He looked up. Dare's ring. Confirmed by the jeweler. Marple's voice stayed level. So he did meet him that night. Harper removed the next object. A piece of linen, stiff with dark stains. Blood. Mrs. Merewood gasped. Her hands clutched her chest. Harper continued. A small iron key lay beneath the cloth. He held it up. The tower key. Marple's tone dropped to a whisper. He locked his own confession. Mrs. Merewood's knees gave way. She collapsed into the chair. Harper caught her arm. Sit, ma'am. Breathe. Her voice came weakly. I told him not to go. I begged him. He said he must face it before dawn. Marple asked softly. Face what? The truth, she whispered. That he'd sinned. Harper placed the items neatly on the table. He met Dare, killed him, hid the ring and cloth, then tried to end it as an accident. Marple nodded, and she finished what he started. Mrs. Merewood buried her face in her hands. I wanted to spare him shame, to make it look like mercy. Tears streaked her face. He thought faith could forgive him. I thought love could. Marple knelt beside her. Her voice quiet, measured. He killed to protect faith, she said. You lied to protect love. The widow sobbed once, then silence. Harper closed the chest. The echo of the lid sounded heavier than wood should. Marple stood. Truth has weight, Inspector. It never leaves a room empty. He nodded, weary. She'll have to answer for it, Marple replied. We all do, in our own time. She looked once more at the table ring, cloth, key. Each object told its own prayer, each unanswered. Then, without warning, a sharp sound cut the silence. The vicarage doorbell. One toll, clear, measured. Harper turned toward the hallway. No one there, he said. Marple didn't move. Her gaze remained fixed on the chest. Perhaps, she whispered. The bell has found its voice at last. And the echo of that single chime hung in the house steady, cold, impossible. Evening returned with rain. The vicarage sat quiet, every clock paused. Mrs. Merewood rested in the armchair, pale and drained. Inspector Harper stood near the window, hat in hand. Miss Marple waited beside the hearth, her notebook closed. No one spoke for a long time. Then the widow began, voice faint, trembling but certain. You already know most of it, she said. My husband met Edwin Dare that night. The man came for money again. Harper glanced toward Marple. Marple said nothing. The widow continued. He threatened to expose the accounts. Said he'd tell the bishop everything. Jonas begged him to stop. He said the money was borrowed, not stolen. But Dare only laughed. Her hands shook as she spoke. They struggled, near the river path. Dare slipped, fell. The water was deep. Jonas tried to pull him out. He couldn't. When the current took him, he said nothing, just watched. Harper's jaw tightened. Why didn't he tell the police? She closed her eyes. Because he thought confession would damn him. He came home, broken. Said he'd face it before God, not men. Marple's tone stayed soft. So he went to the tower. The widow nodded. He said he would ring the bell at dawn for forgiveness. But he never reached it. Her voice cracked. I heard the fall. I found him below, body twisted. His hand still held the rope. He looked peaceful. She covered her mouth. I couldn't let them think he was a murderer. I couldn't. Harper's voice low. So you staged it? Yes, she whispered. I cleaned the blood. I carried the rope down. I cut it. I left the wax to make it seem old. I wrote the envelope so they'd find it. It was mercy. Marple spoke at last. Mercy built on lies rarely stands, Mrs. Merewood. The woman's eyes filled again. I only wanted to save his name. He served God his whole life. Marple's gaze was steady. And yet, he chose silence instead of repentance. You chose deceit instead of truth. Sin cannot be saved by ceremony. The words settled heavy in the room. The widow bowed her head. I know, she said quietly. I've known since that morning. Harper folded his notebook, voice subdued. She'll make a statement. That's enough for tonight. Marple turned toward the window. Rain streaked the glass, tapping in uneven rhythm. Then a sound rose from beyond the churchyard. Faint, deep, metal trembling through air. Harper froze. The bell. Another note followed. Then a third. Slow, measured. Marple listened without expression. The first true sound in days, she said softly. Perhaps Brentley has remembered honesty. The widow looked toward the window, tears falling silently. 3 slow chimes faded into the rain. The village held its breath, and Miss Marple closed her notebook because the bell had already finished the confession for her. St. Mary Mead again. Morning still. No letters, no bells, just the familiar tick of the clock above the bell mantel. Miss Marple sat by the window. The kettle whistled once. She poured tea, slow and steady. Steam curled between her fingers. Her notes from Brentley lay closed beside the cup. She would file them later. Not yet. A knock at the door. Then Lady Bantry's voice. May I come in, Jane? Marple smiled. You already have. The friend entered, shaking off the chill. I read it in the paper, she said. Tragic business. A curate, a bell, a widow. You always find the quiet storms, don't you? Marple handed her a cup. Storms find me. I simply listen. Lady Bantry settled opposite. You arrive when heaven keeps quiet, Jane. Always. Marple stirred her tea. Heaven rings true only when hands are clean, she said softly. Lady Bantry looked at her for a long moment. You mean hers or his? Marple's smile barely moved. Both. But truth cleans slower than guilt can hide. The fire murmured once. They drank in silence. Outside, sparrows argued on the sill. Marple's gaze drifted to the garden. Orderly. Still. Lady Bantry sighed. Will she be tried? Yes. But mercy begins where law ends. A pause. Then quietly. Do you ever tire of it, Jane? The ugliness beneath good manners? Marple shook her head. No, because it reminds me why kindness must stay sharp. The kettle hissed again. Steam rose, soft, white, forgiving. Marple refilled both cups. No bells today, Lady Bantry said. Marple nodded. Silence can be honest too. They sat without speaking. The clock ticked once more. Tea cooled between them. And somewhere beyond the garden wall, a single robin sang brief, uncertain, like truth, testing its own voice. Well, my friends, what did you think? Could you have heard the truth before Miss Marple did? Let's the silence breathe. The bell of Brentley has rung its last, yet echoes remain, in guilt, in mercy, in the small corners of every quiet heart. You've listened, watched, and reasoned, just as she does. That's what makes these nights worth sharing. Tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Your chair, your train, your bedside lamp? Leave your thoughts below, my friends. He smiles through the words. Because tomorrow, another kettle will boil, beat, and another quiet crime will whisper through St. Mary Mead. The sound fades slowly. A clock tick, a cup set down, and then silence waiting for the next secret to begin.